speed.
Well, Mr. Scott, it's really a pleasure to have a chance to get to know you because you scored a movie that was very widely shown in our area and widely discussed. That was North Dallas 40, and now, of course, you have scored The Final Countdown. But I've always wanted to find out from a composer if you sometimes feel like stepchildren, and the reason I say that is that I think people tend to take the film music just kind of as a matter of course. They would have to see a film without the music to understand the part it plays. Do you ever feel like a stepchild?
No, I never feel like a stepchild, and I'm thinking, of course, that you're absolutely right. First of all, the music is generally thought of last after the film has been completed, and one comes and then the composer has to rush his music out. He is given the least chance to think about the thing, and of course it ends up as probably one of the more important elements. But I certainly don't feel like a stepchild.
When you're writing music for film, is it difficult to try to be original because of all the films that have been written? It would seem like that all of the ideas have been used up by now.
I don't think I strive to try to feel original. I know that I have an identity of my own, and I think that people that know my music will recognize it even though it presents itself in many genres. But I also think, I'm sorry, but...
That's all right. That's all right. Let me just start the question over, and because we edit anyway. Okay. Is it, Mr. Scott, difficult to try to be original? And I'm thinking you're sitting there as the composer with a certain piece of film that you're trying to write to, and maybe it's something that has been done in films, that type of thing, be it a romantic theme or an action theme or whatever. Do you sit there and think, oh, how can I be original? How can I write something that hasn't been done many, many times?
Well, first of all, I don't think about those questions. What I think about is what is the requirement of the film at that specific time. And I think that sometimes you are going to do something that has been done and that people know is telling you, giving you the right message, expressing grief, anxiety, whatever. Nevertheless, I think that one tends to be original if one is original. And I think that I can give examples. For instance, John Barry is definitely recognized as John Barry. Henry Mancini is recognized as Henry Mancini, in spite of whatever they write. So I don't worry about those things.
Now, your instrument has always been the flute, hasn't it? Or primarily
Yes,
the flute.
yes.
And you're very well known as a jazz flautist. Do you tend, as you're writing music, to think in terms of a flute?
I can't afford to, even though I'm accused of thinking of it at times. No, I think, for instance, if one is writing music that doesn't call for a flute, then you don't think in terms of a flute. Of course, I love the flute, and I know that I write very well for it. No, I don't favor the flute, for sure. I still love it, of course.
When you're writing, you don't hear the notes as a flute hears them.
Oh, definitely not, no. This is very interesting because when you have to demonstrate what you propose doing for a film, you generally play the piano, but you hear the whole orchestra, or whatever it might be, in your head, and you have to try and persuade your director or your producer that he has to imagine an orchestra, which I can do, but invariably they can't.
Let's take the storm scene in The Final Countdown. Now, as the composer, what were you faced with there?
Well, I was faced with a great deal of problems. First of all, because the storm didn't exist when I came to write the music. The special effects department were still working on it. They were scratching their heads. They didn't know what they were going to do. I was on the phone ringing up the sound people, shouting for help, saying, what kind of sounds are you going to be using? No one could tell me. So I had to go many ways. I had to do music that would cut through wind and rain and thunder and lightning. I had to do music that would blend with other kinds of effects. I had to go all kinds of ways. One way that I went, and it was finally incorporated in the storm, even though you don't hear it, but you do very much feel it, was a process of using natural sounds that I thought were derived very much from nature. I used recorders that you blow and ocarinas that make a very natural and sound that is identified with nature, combining them all in a very strange way, and then treating them electronically and superimposing them on top of themselves, slowing them down, speeding them up, and making a most excruciating sound. I can remember that the sound editor described it as awful noise on the box of music. You don't hear it, but...
It is. It's noise that makes you want to hold your ears. It is just so penetrating.
That's what it was supposed to do, but I must say that that's not all my noise. There are many, many, many elements in that storm. It's a very, very subtle mix.
Were you generally pleased with the way the music then came out?
Delighted. Yes, I think, first of all, it was such a pleasure and such a challenge to do a film like The Final Countdown, which is a film full of bravado, patriotism, and secondly, the producers and directors said, you know, John, you do whatever you want. I have to also admit that Richard St. John's was very, very strong in what he wanted, and I hope he got what he wanted.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Mr. Scott. Enjoyed meeting you, and congratulations on what appears to me to be a superb job of scoring this movie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
First.
SB.
Okay, some questions now. Mr. Scott, as you're sitting there faced with composing music for a film, does it ever come into your mind that it's so hard to be original now that all the musical ideas have been used up? Do you sometimes, as the composer, feel like a stepchild, feel like that people just take the music and the scoring for granted? Let me just keep rolling.
Storm.
Yeah. Now, if we take the storm, for instance, Mr. Scott, what were you faced with there? Your main instrument, of course, has always been a jazz. You are renowned as a jazz flautist. When you're composing, do you hear the music as a flute hears it? Okay. All right, I think that'll do it. That'll get it.
Hold it 1 second.
All right.
Actually, you know, I'm not renowned as a jazz flautist. I used to play. I
Oh.
haven't played for
Oh, really? Okay.
15 years or so.
All right, let me do that question over then. Are you still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Your instrument has been mainly the flute, Mr. Scott. When you write music, do you hear it as a flute plays it? Okay.